This is an analysis of La Belle Dame sans Merci by John Keats from the Edexcel English Literature Poetry Anthology, the relationship section. Um, Before we look at this poem, you really need to know a little bit about the ballad form in poetry, because this is a ballad. And of course, you have to talk about structure and form when you compare these poems. So the ballad form in poetry is traditionally written in quatrains, so that's in 4-line stanzas. It often tells a story, a narrative, and it often has a refrain in it, which is a line that's repeated. Maybe not the line at the end of every stanza, but several times during the poem. Traditionally, also, it has a very strong rhythm. Um, so it has alternating lines of iambic tetrameter. So that's 8 syllables made up of 4 iambs, and iambic trimester. That's 6 syllables made up of 3 iambs, and that is literally known as ballad meter. So an example of this would be, these are what you see, the iambs here, with the bold font being for the stressed words and the non-bold font being for the unstressed. The horse for Anne it rode upon, he ambled like the wind. With silver he was shod before, with burning gold behind. This isn't from La Belle Dame, it's just to show you real traditional ballad form, okay? 8 syllables, 6 syllables, 8 syllables, 6 syllables, all of iambs. John Keats is the writer of this poem, along with Byron, Shelley, Wordsworth, part of the 19th century Romantic movement. That was a reaction against 18th century society's new interest in science and focused more on nature, the imagination, the outpouring of emotions. Capital R, romantic doesn't just mean lovey-dovey. Keats composed this specific poem after an autumnal walk through Winchester in 1819, the year that marked the end of his poetic career. He was having a lot of financial troubles and he needed to turn towards more lucrative work than writing poetry, which wasn't selling very well. He wrote this poem when he was 24 years old. He would be tragically dead by 26. He died of tuberculosis. So, ballads, lyrical ballads designed to be set to music, or literary ballads designed to tell a story, grew out of an increasing interest in the ballad form among social elites and intellectuals in the capital R Romantic movement from the later 18th century onwards. And the Romantics, such as Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Keats, were attracted to the simple and natural style of these folk ballads, which often told a story, either of a fantastical story of the supernatural, or of stories of knights and ladies, um, or stories of folklore. The Victorians and late Romantics, such as Christina Rossetti, deployed ballad forms to explore spiritual and moral issues and used the form to discuss the stereotypical treatment and representation of men and women's roles in society. And this seems to be what Keats is doing in this one. It is a story which has elements of the supernatural. It's a story about love. It's a story about a knight and a fair lady who he's obsessed with and who kind of puts a spell on him. And it's his kind of take of what love is and what women can do to you in a relationship. So again, just a hint back at the Romantic movement. We have talked about it before, but the first 4 poems in the Edexcel anthology are by the capital R Romantic poets. It was an artistic, literary, and intellectual movement. And it was strongest in the period 1780 to 1850. So as you can see, it spanned the 18th and 19th centuries. And it was the free expression of feelings of the artist. Wordsworth called it the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And it was about emotion, love, nature, beauty, and the pursuit of beauty and pleasure over logic, reason, scientific research, all of that. It was kind of quite different, opposite to the Romantic ideals. So the Romantic poets shared a strong belief and interest in the importance of nature, and a close connection with nature and the natural world is the purest form of kind of spiritual love that you can that you can get. Seeing God in nature is what the romantics like to do a lot. So it's not about romance in the form of love for people, more love for nature, the natural world, and a respect for the past and our cultural heritage. Key romantic poets: William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley. And we also need to know about the stock character of the femme fatale in literature. And this is a dangerous female, a female who could lure you to your death, basically. So, stock character meaning kind of a stereotype of the mysterious and seductive woman whose charms ensnare her lovers, often leading them to compromising, dangerous, and deadly situations. And the two pictures here, you see it quite a lot in early detective films where there's the mysterious, alluring, beautiful female that double crosses the man. You see it in quite a lot of James Bond films as well, and things like that. A woman as kind of her power is in her beauty and her kind of sexuality that traps the man and makes him do things that he wouldn't do, or gets him into danger in some way. And it's called a femme fatale character. Okay, so this is the ballad. I'm going to read it all the way through. La Belle Dame sans Merci itself is obviously French, one of the romantic languages, and means the beautiful woman without mercy. Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, alone and palely loitering? The sedge has withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, so haggard and so woe begone? The squirrel's granary is full, and the harvest's done. I see a lily on thy brow, with anguish moist and fever dew, and on thy cheek a fading rose fast withereth too. I met a lady in the meads, full beautiful, a fairy's child. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild. I made a garland for her head, and bracelets too, and fragrant zone. She looked at me as she did love, and made sweet moan. I set her on my pacing steed, and nothing else saw all day long. Her sidelong would she bend and sing a fairy's song. She found me roots of relish sweet, and honey wild, and manna dew. And sure in language strange she said, I love thee true. She took me to her elfin grot, and there she wept and sighed full sore, and there I shut her wild, wild eyes with kisses four. And there she lulled me asleep, and there I dreamed, ah, woe betide, the latest dream I ever dreamt on the cold hillside. I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La belle dame sans merci, thee hath in thrall. I saw their starved lips in the gloam, with horrid warning gaped wide, and I awoke and found me here, on the cold hill's side. And this is why I sojourn here, alone and palely loitering, though the sedge is withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Okay, so having a look at this, I've explained a little bit about ballad form, and you would need to put that into the context of this as well, along with Keats being a romantic. Um, and it is in quite a regular rhyme and rhythm, although it isn't in traditional ballad form, at least not all the way through of the 8 and 6. Um, and the rhythm is kind of broken up a bit as well. So even though Keats is kind of leaning towards the traditional ballad form, he does change it, he does modernize it, he does make it a bit different. And perhaps this is a traditional ballad, perhaps is a little bit more hopeful, happier than this. It's about love. Um, and this is about a sinister kind of love. So perhaps the slightly jarring rhythm in it at times, and the reason that he's messed about with the kind of rhythm and line length and things like that is showing that love isn't always what it seems, like a poem like Valentine as well. But he's showing that through the structure of it, which should be traditional ballad but isn't quite there. Um, Arms, loitering, lake, sing make it an ABCB rhyme scheme. Arms were begone, full, done. Brow, fever, dew, rose, two. So you've got a regular rhyme scheme all the way through of A, B, C, B. It's all written in quatrains like a ballad, and it has the traditional themes of a ballad and a storytelling kind of thing. It has the refrain as well. Um, there's the No Birds Sing, which comes back at the end, and there's a couple of other kind of repeated lines as well. So the basic story of it is this first few stanzas, the first three are actually said by a speaker who meets, is like the first speaker who meets this knight and asks him what's happened. And then the rest of the poem, after stanza four onwards, is the knight speaking his own tale. So it's kind of it's, you wouldn't say bookended because that would mean that the first speaker would come back at the end, but it is slightly removed. We're hearing the knight's tale through the eyes of someone else meeting him on a path. So how sure are we at the truthfulness of this encounter? We're not hearing it firsthand, we're hearing it a story that the knight has related. And the fact that he's a knight at all, it's quite an archaic thing, you know, the knight in shining armor. It's harking back to medieval times and the fairy stories and King Arthur and all of those kind of myths and legends. Um, there's also archaic spelling in here. If I go forward a little bit, the fairy here, spelt in the old fashioned way, or the almost old English way of FAE. We now spell it FAI. Um, and that again has connotations of like ancient stories, ancient supernatural um, events, you know, a time before a perhaps more pagan kind of supernatural time. Okay, so this is somebody speaking out, and there's an exclamation. This poem is actually started by with an oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms? It started with a question, alone and palely loitering. And the exclamation shows the shock of the speaker at meeting the knight in this state. He must look very traumatized for the speaker to have to speak like this. The first thing he says is an exclamation here. What can ail thee, knight at arms? So there's some sense of a fight or a battle going on. He is armed. And then you've got alone and palely loitering. How do you loiter palely? It's an adverb that wouldn't normally be used, so it's a metaphor. Um, he's not just loitering, which basically means hanging around, but he's doing it palely. He suggesting he is pale, but also suggesting that he's aimlessly, he hasn't got a purpose to his wandering around. And then you get the natural world, sorry, but brought into this, the sedge, which is a kind of just plant, basically greenery, has withered from the lake and no birds sing. So you've got a sense of coldness, a sense of depression, nature, winter, all of that. If you've already looked at my video on neutral tones or studied the poem Neutral Tones, this is very similar in the way that it starts and ends with this kind of description of a wintry, depressing, bleak scene. This is also repeated, what can ail thee, knight at arms? He has to say it twice, shows the deep expression of shock for whatever this knight has been through. And he again, first of all, he's alone and pale laundry, and then he's so haggard and so woebegone. Haggard means to look old and frail, and woebegone. Obviously, he's using quite a lot of archaic language here to hark back to those myths and legends kind of tales. Woebegone, very sad. And then again, the natural world, the squirrel's granary is full and the harvest done. So we know we're at winter time because if the harvest is done, harvest festival is around about the end of October. So the squirrel's granary, the squirrel has hibernated and is, you know, the natural world is coming to the kind of end of the year, basically. And then the natural imagery continues with the metaphor of I see a lily on thy brow. Now, lilies are white, but they are also the flowers of funeral. And if you say an image is like a funeral, you call it funereal. Funereal. So you could say that's funereal imagery there. Again, suggesting death, suggesting sickness, with anguish moist and fever dew. So you're getting all these things still linked to nature, like dew, but this is like the sweat on his face is a fever dew. Like he's covered in this moisture, which is because he's been traumatized. And on thy cheek a fading rose fast withereth too. So you've got the sedges withering from the lake, and then the repetition of that it's also the flowers, the rosiness of your cheeks is also withering. So death and decay are very much part of the description of this night. And on the next, after these first three stanzas, we then have the knight speaking. This is his tale. So this is the reason that he's looking this way. So we switch into first person from the knight's perspective, and he tells us the reason for his traumatic appearance. I met a lady in the meads, full beautiful, a fairy's child. And again, this archaic spelling of the word fairy to bring us into that myths and legends world and kind of medieval kind of world as well. You've got the pause after full beautiful, which is obviously meaning very beautiful, but full beautiful, like she was full of beauty. And it really brings attention, emphasizes the beauty by having that caesura after this. And she was so beautiful that she was, otherworldly. She was a fairy's child. She wasn't of this earth. She wasn't even human. That's how beautiful she was. So you can take that as a metaphor, or you can think of it as he's really speaking of something supernatural here. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild. So you've got this quite traditional depiction of beauty here, but then it kind of turns around. Her eyes were wild, and you've got the connotations of wild meaning crazy and uninhibited, untamable. And then he tells you that he gave her presents. He made a garland for her head and bracelets too, and fragrant zone. She looked at me as she did love and made sweet moan. And this could be seen as a bit of a sexual thing, especially when we go to the next stanza after it. And he gives her presents here of, again, a garland, like a ring of flowers. I think the key thing here is looking at this is actually as a simile. She looked at me as she did love, meaning as if she loved me. So it's a hint of deception here. She didn't really. She's just looking as if she does. It's a simile rather than the reality. And made sweet moan, which then leads us on to the next verse, which some people see as a metaphor for having sex. I set her on my pacing steed, and nothing else saw all day long, for sidelong would she bend and sing a fairy's song. So this has sexual connotations, but also it could just mean a steed is a horse that, you know, he literally did put her on the back of his horse and they went somewhere. But it's after this particular encounter that he seems to be particularly obsessed. I didn't see anything else the whole day. So it's kind of hyperbole here. When this has happened, when he takes her away on his horse, or however you want to interpret that, he's obsessed from that point on. He didn't see anything else. And she's singing this fairy song to him, which is a spell that has him enthralled. And then she she gives him her present. So he's given her the flowers and the bracelet and everything. And this is what she gives him: roots of relish sweet, and honey wild, and manna dew. So she gives him these natural um, things, but they're all quite spell-like, natural potions, wild honey, roots of a sweet relish, manna dew. And manna is meant to be the bread of heaven. If you look in the Bible, manna is bread from heaven. So it's like she's bewitching him with all these slightly magical ingredients. Sorry, this pen is the bane of my life. Bewitching him. And sure, in language strange, she said, I love thee true. Um, so she doesn't say it in English. In a strange language, she says it. So even the way she says it is hard to interpret, is difficult to understand. So does she really mean it? How can he know that she means it? She says it in a strange language. Everything's mysterious. She took me to her elfin grot. That's like a grotto, like a cage. Sorry, cave, not a cage. Um, for elves, basically. So you've got the supernatural imagery still carrying on here. And there she wept and sighed full sore, and there I shut her wild, wild eyes with kisses for. Um, and again, you've got a repetition of wild here. First of all, she has wild eyes. Now she's got wild, wild eyes. Like things are getting worse. Things are getting even more intense. And there she lulled me asleep. So she's kind of again putting a spell on him. And there I dreamed, says Ura. Ah, woe betide. There's lots of pauses in this one to show the terror of his dream. The latest dream I ever dreamt on the cold hillside. And by that, he kind of means the last dream I ever dreamt, or the most recent one I ever dreamt on the cold hillside. Again, this imagery of cold, winter, depression. And this is what he sees in his dream. And you note the repetition of pale here. There's a lot of imagery of very muted colours here, which is why this can be successfully compared with neutral tones as well, with the negatives of a relationship, the lack of colour, the cold surroundings, the circularity of the structure. He sees in his dream pale kings and princes, pale warriors. So these are all things that are strong and have power. Kings, princes, warriors. They signify strength and power, but they are all struck down by the La Belle Dame, who has them in thrall, meaning under her spell. So she has the power to put even kings, princes, warriors under a spell. And what he's really saying here is this whole thing is a metaphor for love, how love can bring anyone, no matter who they are, how powerful they are, how much money they have, can ruin them by this woman that they get obsessed by. And again, the imagery of, like in neutral tones with the starving sod and all of that, I saw their starved lips in the gloam with horrid warning gaped wide, like their mouths gaping open. Again, it's like quite a haunting vision and actually quite nightmarish, that he sees all these people basically dead in the dream and killed by La Belle Dame, not literally, but because of the spell that she's put on them. So haunting imagery here. And then he wakes up because he's seen that in a dream. I awoke and found me here on the cold hillside. Again, that refrain has happened here. Look, on the cold hillside here, and again here on the cold hillside, just like no birds sing. So the refrains that repeatedly come in are of images of coldness, death, despair. which is what he's trying to say love does to you, or what this poem is saying does to you, or could do to you. It's like a warning. Um, and then he answers the question at the very end. And this is why I sojourn here. So this is a mirror of the first stanza. If we go back to it, what can ail thee, light of arms alone and palely loitering, the sedges withered from the lake and no birds sing. And the last verse, and this is why I sojourn here alone and palely loitering, though the sedges withered from the lake and no birds sing. So it's nearly exactly the same as the first stanza, showing that he is destined to wander alone and despairing forever because of this woman has put a spell on him, has made him be obsessed by her, and left him for dead because she won't return his love. It's all a cruel game to her. So it's a kind of tale of cautionary tale that love can destroy you. It's very well compared with neutral tones. There's a lot of comparisons you could make with that. I'd say that's the best one to compare it to, with the images of nature, with the circularity of it, with the negative aspects of love, with the idea that relationships are bad news, basically. Um, and it's obviously an interesting poem because it's of the ballad tradition, but slightly not written completely as a traditional ballad. There's a little breaks with the normal ballad tradition that you could interpret any way you wanted. This is a poem about love being a destructive force, and about women kind of leading you astray. You could see it as a bit misogynistic, but obviously this was a different time and place.